Hey, listeners of the BioReport. Before we get started this week, I wanted to tell you about the digital library from DeepDyve. How much time does your team spend looking for research papers? Google, PubMed, social media. There's got to be a better way. You can now search a reference database of 100 million scientific papers and read the full text of 20 million articles, annotate them, and share with colleagues. It's the smarter way to do research. Here's the best part. If you're like me and been frustrated by not being able to access articles you find because they're behind a paywall, I've got good news. With DeepDyve, you get one-stop affordable research. If you're a listener of the BioReport, you can try the enterprise version of the service for free for 1 month. Go to deepdive.com/podcast and enter the code BioReport. That's DeepDyve, DeepDyve.com/podcast, and the code is BioReport, one word, all caps. I'm Daniel Levine, and this is the BioReport. The side effects of opioids and the potential for addiction underlies the need for new approaches to the treatment of pain. SiteOne Therapeutics is developing a pipeline of therapies that target sodium ion channels to block the electric signals sent from the site of pain. Unlike other similar drugs, SiteOne is able to target these sodium channels with great specificity to avoid the types of side effects that have limited the value of the drugs that target these proteins. We spoke to John Mulcahy, president and CEO of SiteOne, about the company's approach to pain, its pipeline, and how its therapies are able to hit their targets with precision. John, thanks for joining us.
Danny, it's a pleasure to be here.
We're going to talk about acute and chronic pain and SiteOne Therapeutics' efforts to develop a new class of non-opioid and non-NSAID pain relievers. Perhaps we can start with the limits of the existing options for people with acute and chronic pain condition. There's been a lot of attention to the problem with opioids, but how effective are they, and what are the problems with their use beyond the problem of addiction?
It's a great question. So opioids are relatively effective for most types of acute pain. It becomes quite a bit more complicated, however, when you get into chronic pain. And there's a growing body of evidence, I would say, that in many situations in chronic pain, really the risks outweigh the potential benefits of using opioids. And when you get into kind of even more difficult to treat types of pain, such as neuropathic pain, the efficacy in those situations is really poor. So kind of a summary I've heard and remembered in the past is that opioids work well for about a third of patients suffering from pain. In another third, they work, but the combination of the side effects and the potential for dependence makes the therapy not worthwhile. And then in another third, they just don't work well to treat the pain at all. So there's really an enormous unmet medical need out there for new approaches to treating pain.
NSAIDs are also a commonly used choice for pain. How effective are these, and what limitations do they pose?
Right. So NSAIDs are effective for what I would call mild to moderate pain. They do have some side effects, but nowhere near on the level of opioids. It's really the kind of moderate to severe pain where the need is greatest, and NSAIDs are not sufficiently effective for that patient population.
Well, how big a problem does pain represent, and how well addressed is it today?
So if looking at just the US, the numbers I've seen are roughly 20% of the population, in the neighborhood of 50 to 60 million individuals in the United States suffer from chronic pain. About half of that population has pain so severe that it really interferes significantly in their daily life, their activities. So it's a very large market, a very large unmet medical need, which will only grow as the kind of lifespans increase. We have an older population with more just kind of arthritis, the kinds of things that happen to everyone as they age. So it's a very large need. Thinking about it in terms of dollars, in terms of an actual market opportunity, the numbers I've seen are that the market for opioids in the U.S. is currently around $18 billion a year. And keep in mind, these are mostly older drugs that are generic and relatively inexpensive. So I would say it's an enormous unmet medical need that needs to be addressed. And there's also a significant market opportunity there for companies that are willing to step up and try to solve the problem.
Well, what happens in the body when someone feels pain, and what role does the peripheral nervous system play in that?
Mm-hmm. So pain involves both peripheral and kind of central circuitry. If you think about acute pain for starters, for example, if you put your hand on a hot stove, what happens is that the noxious signal, that heat, sets off an electrical signal starting at your skin or whatever part of your body touched it. It first moves along a neuron as an action potential to the spinal cord. That peripheral neuron synapses with a central neuron, and the signal is then transmitted up into the central nervous system, into the brain. And there are opportunities really to modulate that pain signal at both levels, both at the peripheral neuron, where the kind of incoming nociceptive signal is coming in, and then also in the CNS, either in the spinal cord or in the brain. So different opportunities to attack the problem.
You're developing therapies for a number of indications, including acute pain, chronic pain. From a biological point of view, is all pain the same? Does something happen differently depending on the underlying cause or where it occurs in the body?
Absolutely. There are many different types of pain. And kind of coming back to this discussion about the peripheral circuitry and the central circuitry, there are opportunities for both systems to kind of go off track and become hypersensitive to this incoming painful stimulation. You can have sensitization of the peripheral neurons if they get damaged, and this is one of the causes, this underlying nerve injury of what's called neuropathic pain, nerve injury pain. You can also have what's called central sensitization, where the circuitry in the spinal cord and the brain actually gets kind of wound up. And it's thought you can actually have pain that's entirely centrally mediated, potentially, where even though there's no longer an incoming peripheral stimulus, you have this kind of central sensitization, this wind up. In most cases, it's probably not that extreme. There's probably still some incoming peripheral input. It's just that things that shouldn't be painful are then kind of interpreted by the central nervous system, the sensitized central nervous system, as painful.
Your therapies in development act on specific proteins known as voltage-gated sodium ion channels. What are these, and what role do they play in pain?
So voltage-gated sodium ion channels are absolutely essential for the transmission of electrical signals in the body. They're ion channels expressed in neurons that are responsible for conduction of the action potential. So this is both in the peripheral nervous system and the central nervous system. It turns out that there are 9 different subtypes of the voltage-gated sodium channel, and different subtypes are found in different places, different tissues in the body. Our first development candidate, ST2427, targets an isoform or subtype called NaV1.7, which is primarily found in the peripheral nervous system. And it's heavily expressed in these kind of pain-sensing fibers that come from the dorsal side of the spinal cord and innervate tissue such as the skin. And NaV1.7 really rose to prominence based on findings from human genetics, rose to prominence as a target for pain treatment. So individuals with a loss of function in this one subtype of sodium channel are unable to feel, unable to experience almost all types of pain. So it's a non-opioid pain target validated by human genetics.
There are a number of therapies on the market today that target voltage-gated sodium ion channels. How safe and effective are these therapies, and how do your candidates differ?
So there are a number of compounds out there that target sodium ion channels, and the ones that are probably most well known are the local anesthetics. Drugs like lidocaine, bupivacaine, which are used routinely for local pain relief in, for example, surgical operations. And they're extremely effective, these non-selective sodium channel inhibitors, for basically blocking those pain signals in the peripheral nervous system before they ever get to the spinal cord. The challenge with existing non-selective sodium channel inhibitors is, for the most part, they have to be delivered locally, because otherwise you risk, or you would shut down this kind of electrical conductivity throughout the body, not just in the pain-sensing neurons. The advantage of the isoform selective compounds that we're advancing, such as ST2427 and other candidates, is that because of the selectivity, they can now be administered systemically. So able to be used for really whole body pain relief without many of the side effects of the non-selective inhibitors.
How selective are your therapies?
The first development candidate is over 1,000-fold selective for NaV1.7 over all the other subtypes we've tested.
Well, your lead experimental therapy is ST2427. What is it, and how does it work?
So it's a potent and, as mentioned, highly selective inhibitor of NaV1.7. So this first therapy is actually an intravenous drug. It's intended for the relief of pain in acute care settings, such as the hospital, for example, after surgery. It's administered IV, and currently undergoing a phase 1 study to better understand the pharmacokinetics, safety, tolerability in humans. The drug is intended to basically block pain signals in the peripheral nervous system by inhibiting this ion channel, stop those pain signals before they get to the spinal cord.
You're actually developing this for a number of indications. Why start with acute pain?
Acute pain is a good place to start because it's a very controlled setting to explore this mechanism. NaV1.7, while it's been a high interest target now for at least the past 15 years, no one has really demonstrated convincing clinical proof of concept with this mechanism, and there's some intricacies of the target that are not well appreciated in the literature. So the kind of IV acute care setting is a very controlled setting to explore both the safety and efficacy of the mechanism.
What's known about the safety and efficacy of ST2427 from the work done to date?
Mm-hmm. In the preclinical models that we've run with ST2427 and related compounds, it's very effective across a broad range of kind of types of painful stimulus. We've looked at thermal stimulus, heat. We've looked at mechanical stimulus. We've looked at chemical stimulus within this class. And really across the board, it's very effective. Seems to reproduce many of the effects or have effects similar to what you would expect based on the human genetics.
ST2427 is administered through IV. Can these therapies be delivered orally? And how much of the pain market can be addressed with an IV therapy?
With the IV therapy? Yeah, so IV treatment for pain is in itself a significant market opportunity. There are hundreds of millions of doses of intravenous opioids used each year, and there's an opportunity to replace those with non-opioid alternatives. Ultimately, the goal is certainly to get to a route of administration that's acceptable for chronic use. And oral is one possibility. We're also looking at things like long-acting injectable solutions for chronic pain, where you can imagine a single shot that lasts for a week or a month and delivers long-term pain relief in that way.
You've gotten an award from the National Institute on Drug Abuse to support partial development of ST2427. How significant is that funding, and how far will it take you?
So we are extremely grateful for the support from NIH. We think of NIH as partners in our development of ST2427 as well as our other compounds. The current award takes us at least through our phase 1 study of ST2427. It's actually kind of a milestone-based award, where if we meet specific criteria, we'll then transition into the next phase of the award, which would begin to look at efficacy in surgical pain models, such as bunionectomy. Bunionectomy is it's a procedure that most people may not be familiar with, but it's one that's often done early on in pain clinical trials, because it produces a very robust and consistent level of pain over a period of 1 to 3 days. So it's in many cases the first real clinical proof of concept in patients for a new analgesic.
It's always nice to get non-dilutive funding when possible, but what's the long-term plan for funding the company?
We are very optimistic at the moment. In addition to ST2427, we have a number of other candidates advancing in the pipeline targeting both NaV 1.7 and other ion channels. So we really see this as a portfolio, unlocking the potential of truly isophore selective sodium channel inhibitors for pain as well as other neurological disorders. So long term, we're open to different opportunities. It could be a strategic collaboration with a larger company that has really the commercial and sales force necessary to bring these new therapeutics to the market and help them meet the needs of patients. Also open to other opportunities and going farther on our own. Certainly in IPO at some point in the future could be on the table if things continue to go well.
John Mulcahy, President and CEO of SiteOne Therapeutics. John, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you so much, Danny. Real pleasure.
Thanks for listening. The BioReport is a production of the Levine Media Group. To automatically download this podcast each week, subscribe to our RSS feed or through iTunes or other podcast manager. To join our mailing list, go to levinemediagroup.com. We'd love to hear from you. If you want to drop us a line or are interested in sponsoring this podcast, send an email to danny@levinemediagroup.com. Special thanks to Jonah Levine, who composed our theme music, and the Jonah Levine Collective, which performs it.